Hey everybody, today I'm going to be discussing self-defense and survival. And so when we look at that, this is where we begin before there's ever any physical practices started, before you buy any equipment, before you go down that path at all. This is where I believe you should start. So the greatest asset or the greatest tool that you have in the beginning is your mind. And that goes all the way through the processes, all the processes that we're going to talk about. And so when we begin there, so knowledge and awareness can be interchanged, but you need knowledge and then you need to have awareness. The knowledge is where we start and we understand that we have knowledge of something that we don't like or whatever. And the awareness, so those can be interchanged. So like it might start with awareness, then you gain knowledge of it, okay? Then you develop a strategy of how you're going to deal with it. Then you move on to implementation of that, and then you practice and develop it over time. So with self-defense, that's kind of where we start from, right? So we start with the mind, we prepare the mind. You need knowledge, you need the strategy, you need to develop awareness. So with self-defense, we want to develop awareness of situations and everything else. So anyway, this process is what we do is we break that down and we go through each of these steps with this process. So what we're looking at is, so to get started, where do you start? Okay, spiritual focus, okay? Most morality, just whether people say they have any spiritual background or not, they do, because they still have some ethos that they abide by. So for me, it's Christianity. So my morality is going to come from Christianity and what I believe God says about morality. So with that in mind, then I'm going to move down. I'm going to look at my household and I'm going to see if what I believe in my morality and the teachings that I have from the Bible apply to my household, or I'm going to apply them to my household. I'm going to evaluate which ones I'm doing or can do better or whatever. I'm going to look at my social surrounding structures, okay? So this is the city you live in, town, big scope, little scope, whatever. And I'm going to evaluate the people around me, okay? So I'm going to take my knowledge of all this area. I'm going to take my awareness of how it moves, how the people within it move, how the people within my house move. I'm going to evaluate what their needs are, okay? And am I, what is my purpose? Is it to serve? Is it to protect? Is it, it's going to be different. Are you a child? Are you a father? Are you a mother? Are you single on your own? So, like for me, this is going to be a very different process in here than what it is for like a single young female out on her own, right? Her household's going to look different. So that is, we look at the people within the household, okay, and in our surroundings. So do we need to remove or add people within our social structures, right? Because we're going to need support and we're going to need to cut the dead weight out, all right? So then we look at personal and community safety, okay? So these kind of overlap. So personal is within your household and just your own being, and then community safety would be your surrounding environment. So both of these are environmental awareness. That's where you're going to work through with those. Now here, I wrote environmental, I just mentioned environmental awareness, but in this scope, I actually mean the weather, okay? So what are the actual environmental weather conditions that are going to affect these things, okay? Because safety and self-defense and survival is not just, running and gunning and doing all that stuff. You can be a warrior in all this class of everything we're talking about today, and you can never pick up a firearm, okay? So it's not about that. It's about preparing. So it's physical, but it's also mental. So that's where we start. So But when you look at the environment, like what am I going to have to deal with? Am I going to deal with cold weather conditions, hot weather conditions, rainy weather conditions? You know, little bit on the environmental side too is those elements, earthquakes, whatever you got, wherever you're at, volcanoes, I don't know. You're going to be, those are going to affect all of these because, so earthquakes, even storms, okay, you lose power, okay? So now you have a power outage issue. How are you going to deal with that within your household? And then, so you're going to deal with mental aspects of that, but then you're also going to deal with your personal safety aspects of that. So are you preparing for that? Like generators, backup power, you know, if the power just goes out for a little bit, flashlight and a candle, whatever you need, you know, long-term heating, cooking, cooling. The biggest issue is going to be hot weather for a lot of people because their health isn't good. So if we lose the grid in, you know, summer, that's going to be worse than losing it in winter because you can put a coat on. It's hard to get cool when you can't find a place to get cool. So, and then economics, okay? So wealth management. So where you're at with your own personal wealth is going to determine what you can do with all these, within these categories. So as we go through those categories, what you need to think about is, so when we go back, so let's just go back to household, okay? So maybe my issue to provide more safety is that I don't have enough wealth, or I don't have enough income or cash flow or whatever. And that can change in different ways because you can reduce, you know, you can reduce spending to create more cash flow for more available things that your family might need. Most people can't do that because they've already used, you know, they've already probably done that. So, so you may need, you know, you may need the side hustle. You may need to evaluate what all your talents and skill sets are, and can you, you know, can you dig in and grind out a couple of shifts of overtime, or like whatever skill set you have that you can monetize, right? So everybody wants to sell on Amazon, that's fine. If you want to be a drop shipper, it's great. I don't care how you monetize yourself. That all goes back to knowledge, okay? So if I have knowledge and strategy and then I implement, right? So I'm buying low. I know the people have knowledge of products. I can buy them. I have an awareness of where the market is, where I can sell them. So I take those two, I build it into strategy, and then I start to market, and then I just develop the practical practice of that every day. So you can do it that way, okay? If you have whatever blue collar skill set, or I don't care what it is. If you're artistic and you make greeting cards, it doesn't matter to me. It's the same process. You have the knowledge. You have to have the awareness of whether it's marketable, where it can go, what you can do with it. Then you have a strategy. That's just your business plan. How are you going to get it out there? Implement it, and then just grind it out, okay? So you can see how this process works through each of these subcategories, okay? So now when we get into, so you want to have a basic, this is kind of like a spherical spider web of how this works. It doesn't just go linear. It wraps around in all kinds of different ways, because as you work through the process, what you're going to do is you're going to realize that you may need, so the environmental effects, so if there's, like, we're entering a drought, and before we had a drought this year in our area, Midwest area, we had tons of rain. They're going to have the biggest corn harvest, or they're predicting the largest corn harvest they've had in a long time. So the farmers are actually not doing very well because they have more bushels, but the price has just come down to reflect that. So they've gone below, they're actually selling it for less than it costs to produce it on average normally, but they do have more volume. So they're not going to do basically they're not going to do any better than they've done in the past, and they're going to move more product to do it. So if the overall price for that product, the gross, is averaging out, they're losing money because they're trucking more to move the same. They're moving more weight of product to get the same gross yield because the actual values come down. It's how the market works with commodities. It's terrible, but farmers are just the most hard-headed, resilient people out there. So they also have the biggest mental health issues right now. So that goes back into farmers can work through the same thing. It works really well for that too, obviously, because if you don't have good spiritual focus, your mental state, you're not going to have anything to fall back on when it's all falling out from under you. So anyway, so the environment is going to change economics, so that's going to be fluid. And people are going to, well, I'm not a farmer, but it still affects you because the way that commodities move around are going to affect your household and how you prepare with whatever it is, just your day-to-day meal schedules, or like if you're storing up, and everybody should be storing up. There might come a day where you can't afford to buy anything, so we need to be vigilant and understand that. So anyway, so now when we go back to the actual actual self-defense format, we develop the mind. So we develop the mind through knowledge and awareness, okay? And then we look at, we go back down here, so we know, we use our morality to discern how far we're gonna go, what we're gonna do. So if somebody's attacking me, it's fair game, whatever. But you don't want to use lethal force if there's not lethal force involved. Some people think, well, if somebody attacked me, I can just go. Well, you can't, and that's the issue with being an upper level martial artist, right? Okay, so, and we're going to use the word martial artist for everybody who does self-defense because technically you are, okay? We like to attach the word martial artist to a system usually, but anybody who is, doing anything in a kinetic environment, that's all martial arts. So you have to know where the limits are. So this is going to set the battle lines, all right? So how much do I get pushed and still walk away, and how much where is the line where I begin to defend, okay? And then as we bring that down, it's really easy within your household. Like, somebody crossed my children, somebody's threatening my children or my wife. Very easy to define that line for just about all society, regardless of morals, okay? Because it's your offspring, or it's your spouse or whatever. Surrounding social structures in community gets a little different because where we live, they have the Good Samaritan Act. So you can come to the defense of somebody that's being harmed. Now, the amount of force on force you can use is a little shady. It gets really dicey with firearms because they have to be endangering you. So it's kind of a thing. But because of the Good Samaritan Act, which is a law that we have in place, so it's been like 20 years ago now, but there was a girl that I know, she's a young lady actually, but anyway, I wasn't there, but I think it was a newspaper article about it, but they were in a car wreck and somebody was in the ditch face down and drowning because there's water in the ditch, and everybody was afraid to help that individual because of legal recourse and liability. And she just did it because she knew it was the right thing to do. Well, she was protected under the act we have in Kansas, the Good Samaritan Act, which says you can give aid to somebody that's in danger. So just like when you do your first aid, not first aid, well, it is first aid, but like for CPR, all your first responder stuff for emergency medical. So if they're non-responsive, if they're choking, you have to ask, but if they're non-responsive, you can give aid because that's consent. So that's the way the law is written. So anyway, that's why these two areas get a little gray sometimes, and especially for you guys, if you guys are overseas or anything, there's just craziness going on here in the States too, but you have to be very careful how you proceed in this area. Okay, so what you're going to do, what we do, you evaluate, you implementation, practice. Okay, so when you come into self-defense, you go through your household and your surroundings. So what is the threat level that I might possibly encounter? And that's going to determine where you begin with your physical development. So we're going to take what we know about ourselves, what are our limitations, how far are we willing to go to develop, all those things. You're going to go through that. So do you have a bad knee? Do you have a bad hip? What's your age? What's your mobility? How well can you study and practice? The economics of it come in. What kind of training and study can you afford? And so affording it is not just it is just financially, but it's also the toll on your body. Like I got people that are, they're pushing too hard, they're lifting too heavy. Long term, it's going to beat them up. So physically, like I know a lot of guys within the martial arts community, they have no hips left. There's no cartilage. They've had to have their hips redone at, age 50, 55, 60, whatever. So there's a cost in everything that you do. So within Kempo, which is a system, we're Chinese Kempo, it's a Bakwan Chunfa. Our system is, more like 70-80% handwork, and then about, whatever the balance of that is, 30 to 20% kicking actions, right? It doesn't mean you can't still do all the kicks and all the things, because we still teach all of that. We teach swallowtails and tornadoes, and they actually do them pretty well. But in the engagement, because we're more infighters, a lot of that stuff is not going to be in the practice, especially when you incorporate that, like Kempo. Kempo basically, when it came on the scene, it kind of stole whatever it wanted that worked really well. It's very eclectic, it collects things, and it's very ultra aggressive. So like ours is got a lot of Wing Chun hand movement in it, but then it's all Chinese hand movement, and then our Kung Fu, but we call it circular Chinese, and then but our kicks are not. They are Japanese and Chinese kicks, so it takes whatever it wants. And so it was essentially a street fighting system before any of MMA was around. It was probably more like the original MMA, because it also incorporates weaponry, ground fighting, which would be your grappling, or a lot of people are in jiu-jitsu now, it'd be that. So, but we also do stand-up china, which is binds and breaks and locks and all sorts of stuff, and it draws that from Shaolin China. So primarily Chinese movement, but it's still Kempo and it's still Americanized, so it's going to look a lot different. Anyway, that suits me well because I'm stocky build, not exactly a tall build. I'm 5'7". It tends to lend itself to my body type very well. But it still demands a lot of agility and placement because it's handwork. So it's just what it is. And then, so pick when you start to look at your focus, when we get back to it, to the self-defense. So self-defense does not need to be, it can be a system of self-defense, but self-defense, so like with my students, they understand that when they come in to the school of Kempo that they're learning self-defense, but it's on a long trajectory. Okay, so they're going to learn breaks and binds and stuff the first day they come in, but they're not going to be a fighter as early as if we were training somebody in the self-defense format, or say the boxing format, or to go in the arena, whatever that would be. That process we can do in a lot shorter time, and the reason we can do that in a lot shorter time, at least on, so like you can train a fairly decent somebody with talent and physical aptitude. You can train them to go into like the MMA arena within 6 months. If they do it every day, you can get them there. The martial arts path of studying a system, which is what makes all of us kind of like dinosaurs that still do that, you're looking at, it's a lifetime. The actual trajectory is a lifetime, but you're 5, 6, 7, maybe 12 years, depends on what you're doing, to your instructorship, which would be your black belt, and then you'll have your steps within that, so your dons, your levels, and that's time and grade, but there's a hierarchy to it too, because it can be political in that area. So, but the learning of martial arts, it becomes a lifetime process, whereas self-defense, you can kind of pluck that out, grab it, have an understanding of it. It's a lifetime process in that you always maintain your situational awareness. You know where your exits are, you know where you're going, you know what's going on. And so when we get into that, so that's how you would pick. So like, you determine your physical capabilities, you go interview lots of instructors. Don't just go to the only thing you have available. If you only have one thing available, yes, go to what's available. But like, if there's any type of, if you're with any decent city of size, you should have options. So you need to look into those. And a lot of times the little shops, like the smaller ones, you're gonna get more knowledge, but you're gonna have less people to practice with. So it's kind of a give and take. So like jiu-jitsu, when you're trying to really obtain knowledge, it's good to work like what guys, I have a lot of jiu-jitsu guys I know. I'm not a jiu-jitsu guy, I roll with them, but so they like to work really small groups all the time, but they also want to work with a big school, so that they'll do like tournament play, or they'll just have two organizations they work with. They'll work with there'll be a student in a small school and a student in a large school simultaneously, so that they get the benefit of working with all kinds of body types and body structures and different levels of ability, and and then bringing that back and having a small core group, essentially like they're friends, and they'll isolate techniques and work through them. So that's somewhat the process that you need to have within the self-defense format as well. So you need to have somebody that can pass on direct knowledge to you, but you also need to have a community of people that you can practice that physically with. So when you're looking for a school or a set of self-defense techniques, that's what you want to do. So, and that may be, if you're in an area where you can't get that might mean that you're doing it off of something like this, where you're dealing with a YouTube setup or an interactive Zoom or whatever, and you can participate that way. So we're going to be putting some of that out, so that'll be available. It'll be a very short list of things, but it'll be enough to give you an advantage to where if you're in a bad spot, you should be able to survive it. So anyway, so within that, kind of covered it, okay, but that would be just physical hand-to-hand, what I was kind of going through there with the self-defense. Then you move into within your self-defense, you're going to move into, if it's available to you in your country or wherever you're at, you're going to look at firearms, okay? So you can rise faster, you can acquire, okay, so a firearm is a force multiplier. So what we see with that is that it's kind of a double-edged sword in that people think that because they own a firearm and they know how to, effectively shoot it, and that's subjective as well. Like, what is effective? Everybody has a different viewpoint on that. That's just, it's just like the people that, like, say the football realm, like, guys that played high school and didn't go on. The college guys are like, well, you didn't play college, and the pro guys are like, well, you didn't play pro. It's just like, where are you at in the spectrum? And we're going to talk about that down here in a little bit. So, but this firearm, if all you have is the firearm, and I can close distance on you, or I can disable that in some fashion, and you have no physical capability because you haven't trained in the physical art of self-defense, then that's a dimension that you don't have, and you're gonna lose. You're gonna fail in that. Okay. Now, anything past 3 meters, that's probably firearm range, right, or archery. But I don't know anybody carrying a big bow around these days. But and so also evasion. Like, if you can run fast, if you need to get out of the situation, or if you're in your vehicle, there's all sorts of aspects to self-defense and survival. So once we kind of move away from the immediate entanglement of physical contact, then we move to, into the arena of the firearm, but we also go beyond that because we go into the vehicle, right? So there can be a threat in your space when you're in your vehicle commuting, right? So part of self-defense is not, and survival is not just, like, it's going to be a force-on-force event, okay? It can be literally, like, environmental, right? So we can get into bad situations with the weather when we're traveling, and if we haven't prepared within all these other areas, if we haven't packed a go bag, if we haven't, if we haven't acquired knowledge of how to drive in those conditions, and we don't have a strategy. So, like, a strategy can be as simple as, like, okay, instead of following, a 2-second following distance, I'm going to follow back further with my vehicle, and I'm going to study the patterns of movement of the vehicle in front of me and all the surrounding vehicles. And when I start to see things change, I'm going to create bigger gaps. So that's my strategy. I'm going to implement it, and I'm going to practice it. Now, the reason we have so many accidents the first time we have a little snow is because nobody has awareness of their surroundings anymore. Your Tesla, well, it might know it's snowing now, I don't know, but everybody with an auto-driving car lately, and those without, their minds are not really task-oriented to driving. They got so much else going on in there. So we need to improve awareness. We also need to improve driving ability and knowledge of what your vehicle is capable of, right? So we just keep pushing that bubble, that sphere, we just keep pushing it out, okay? So that's kind of the process. That's what we're looking at doing, okay? So then we have a scale, all right? So on this scale, made some tea before I started this, so. All right. So when you get into your self-defense categories, so hand-to-hand weaponry, so that could be sticks and batons and, firearms. Just keep going down the list, right? Okay. And then you move out to larger, like, vehicles. It just keeps going, okay? So within those, in all your subcategories that you work on, so we want to be a 7 or above, right? So if we're not a 7 or above in anything we work through, 7 or above is where it's okay, and we need to keep practicing it. We need to maintain it, okay? If you're on a 5, if you're in this zone right here, this zone, you just you need to train and evolve to a 7. Okay, if you're below a 5, and this is a good way to look at business too. Okay, if I'm below a 5, if I'm down here somewhere, I do need to try to move up this ladder or move up this scale, but I may not be able to. So like when we talk about self-defense, we might have physical limitations. So there's certain things we're not going to study and we're not going to train, right? And so like, and also there's places around the world where they're disarmed. They don't get to have firearms. So okay, so that's gonna bring you below this, because that's gonna be one of your dimensions. And if you don't have one, that's gonna bring you all the way down to 0. Okay, so you have to find. So if it's a category where it's a skill set, you need to find a partner that's up in this bracket and exceeds this, and you need to co-op with that. So that's where community safety and personal safety, right? We build those in together, okay? So that also may mean, like within personal community safety or household and surroundings, these kind of overlap, right? So if the monetary system goes away, fails, or whatever, you're gonna have to trade and barter, right? So if we found ourselves in that situation, we have to have assets within these communities and these properties that we're looking at that we already have pre-existing relationships with, so that we can get through the process, right? So anything 5 and below, I'm looking for, you're gonna be a long time in the process getting above a 7 if you're down here, okay? So what we want to do is we want to outsource that or sub that out. So we want to partner with somebody that can help us achieve this position, and maybe we have a strength that they don't have that we can offer, okay? So that's where you got to figure out your community. If you're strong enough in enough categories, then if you're a 3 over here, you can be like, well, maybe I'm a 3, but one of my family members is up here, okay? So that counts too. This can be, within, so personal versus household, right? So this is you, we're looking at it, but then people within your household have the same spectrum, all right? So that's where we begin. This process works pretty well for anything in life, because these are kind of your standards for development. So before you get anywhere, before you do anything, this is the thing that you can do completely for free in the whole survival and self-defense area, the realm that we're talking about, because everything is. So like with us, we look at it as homesteading. The original homesteaders, they were on their own. Yeah, there was a government somewhere out there, but you had to, till the land, raise your products, raise your livestock, you had to protect it, defend it, you had to ship it, you had to be able to deploy it to wherever it needed to go, and you had to, that was after the harvest. So you're relying on, pretty much yourself, your household. There might have been a community, so like with harvesting season, everybody kind of co-op, right? So the environmental effects of everything, all right? Too much heat, you're not going to be able to, crops aren't going to produce, but it's going to be hard to harvest too, because too much heat affects things. Too much rain is the same, but the opposite way. Economics are all those things put together, and where you're at in your wealth and assets is going to determine how much input you can pour back in to the situation. So kind of going back through it, but it works in everything. So when we look at it, situational awareness is the very first spot that you talk to. So you, like from a self-defense standpoint, if you find yourself in a place where you actually need to use a skill set that is part of self-defense, you have failed in your situational awareness a long time ago. It could have been choices you made 10 years ago or 20 years ago because, you know, you should have moved. You should have moved out of the area you're in. There's too much crime. There's whatever. Okay, it could be that, you know, the hours you've chosen to be out. We know that crime takes place. There's more crime after dark, right? So, it all begins there, and we work through this process there. So, if I'm, you know, a young college female and I got to walk to my car in the dark, because, you know, society says you're perfectly fine as long as you got a safety app on your phone, but that's not going to work. You're going to be long gone and nobody will know where you went. So I'm going to have knowledge of my surrounding areas. I'm going to have awareness as I work through that of where my exits are. I'm going to have awareness of what my vehicle should look like as I approach it. Just all the things, like what looks out of place, but I'm going to do the best I can. I'm speaking in third person kind of, but I do this myself. Like, I'm going to try to be in well-lit areas. I'm going to have knowledge of the parking area. I'm going to have knowledge of my route from where I leave my vehicle to where I have to walk in the building. Things like that. I'm going to know how to approach my vehicle from enough of a distance that I can tell if there's anything wrong with it before I get to it. I don't want to get up to it and find the problem face to face. I don't want to find somebody in it face to face. I mean, there's a lot of guys that I know that would. They just, like, you know, enjoy that, but that's a different type of people. But you know, there's tons of people that are just waiting for the opportunity to use their skill set. And then, you know, so that's strategy. Implementation is going through the process, and then I practice it. And then, you know, practicing helps with the development of it. So when I go in a restaurant, I'm going to know where the exits are. And go in any building, I'm going to have an exit strategy and awareness of the people and the movement and patterns of people around me. And when a pattern's not right, then I'm going to pick up on it. Okay. I'm going to know how to sit at the table, and I'm going to know who at the table is sitting with me that I need to cue in on and watch them as they watch other movement. So they don't even have to be trained. Women inherently pick up on bad vibes in certain situations. So, like, I know that when I'm at a restaurant, I'm going to kind of posture myself in a certain place, a certain way, so I understand the environment and can see it in the fashion that I want to. My wife is going to sit across from me, and I'm going to watch her expressions. I'm going to be able to tell what's going on because she has practice in this, but it's different. She's not as deep into it as I am, but I can still watch her movements and understand I can read the room by watching her. So that's where we have to go. That's where we begin. That's how this whole process works out. You're going to apply that in your household as well, right? Something goes bump in the night, who's going to hear it, right? Are you going to be so exhausted that you don't hear anything? Or is your ear going to be set to hear the pitch of whatever that little thing is, okay? It doesn't always have to be you. You can know that, like, some people are more attentive in the second half of the night than they are the first, and you're going to have to rely on that if you can't handle it. So, you know, second, third, and fourth watch. So it just continues to overlap. All right, guys, so gonna wrap it up there. Basically, hope this helps everybody. We'll kind of get into this and isolate some parts of it later on going forward. If anybody watching this has any questions or comments or anything, just put it in the comments on the video, and I will get back to you on it. And hopefully this helps. Hopefully this gives you guys a good starting point. So I think this is how we do it, and this is how I teach it. So just hoping it helps some people out there if it's what they're looking for. So talk to you guys later.